Zane Reynolds didn't think twice before kicking open the door to the smoke-filled conference room, hoisting the unconscious woman into his arms, and charging through the chaos like a man on a mission, because he was. "Hold on," he muttered, tightening his grip on her as flames licked the hallway behind them. The fire had started fast. One minute he was mopping the floors of the downtown hotel where he worked nights as a janitor, and the next, alarms were blaring and smoke was pouring through the vents. He hadn't even meant to go into that wing. It was a closed-off section under renovation, but he'd heard coughing, and then he saw her, slumped against the far wall, coughing, barely conscious. Now, stumbling out into the fresh air, he lowered her gently onto the sidewalk just as emergency crews swarmed the building. "Miss, can you hear me?" a paramedic called, rushing over. Zane stepped back, chest heaving, soot streaked across his face. His shirt was torn, his hands burned, but all he could see was her face. She was beautiful. Even with ash on her cheeks, her lips parted, eyes fluttering open. Her gaze locked on him first, and something shifted in her expression like she was trying to remember him. "Is she okay?" he asked, voice hoarse. "She'll be fine," the paramedic said. "We'll take her to St. Jude's for observation." Zane nodded, his breath catching. He didn't even know her name. He didn't realize she was a millionaire. And he definitely didn't know she'd just fallen for the man who saved her. "Dad," Kellen whispered, tugging Zane's sleeve as they sat in the hospital waiting room. "Are you going to be okay?" Zane looked down at his 7-year-old son and forced a tired smile. "Yeah, buddy, just a rough night. We'll get home soon." Kellen leaned his head against Zane's arm, half asleep. Zane wrapped the kid's hoodie tighter around him. He'd picked Kellen up from his neighbor's place after the fire, not wanting to leave him overnight again. He hated that he had to work nights and raise his son alone, but after his ex walked out 2 years ago, it was just them. "Mr. Reynolds," a nurse called. Zane stood quickly. "Yeah, there's someone asking to see you from room 304. "Who?" She didn't say. "Just said you saved her life." Zane blinked. "Oh, okay," he kissed Kellen's forehead. "Stay here, bud, I'll be right back." When he stepped into room 304, she was sitting up in bed and Roman 4 in her arm and a blanket draped over her lap. Her hair was pulled back now, revealing soft cheekbones and wide, curious eyes. She smiled as soon as she saw him. "You really did carry me out," she said. "I wasn't dreaming." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Yeah, you were out cold." She held out a hand. "Callie Prescott." He hesitated, then took her hand gently. Zane Reynolds." Her grip was soft but steady. "Thank you, Zane. I couldn't just leave you there. I know, that's why I wanted to see you." She tilted her head, studying him. "And your son, I saw him in the hallway." "Kellen, right?" Zane nodded. "Yeah, he's my whole world." Callie's eyes warmed. "He looked so proud when he saw you, like his dad was a superhero." Zane shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. "I'm no superhero, just a janitor who got lucky tonight." Something flickered in her eyes. But she didn't correct him. Not yet. 2 days later, Zane was back at work. The hotel had reopened most of the lower floors, and he needed the paycheck. He was rinsing out a mop bucket when a sleek black car pulled up to the lobby doors. He barely glanced at it until the back door opened and Callie stepped out, flawless in a white coat and heels that probably cost more than his month's rent. He blinked. "Callie," she smiled and walked toward him, her presence lighting up the lobby. "I figured you'd be here. What are you doing back here?" "I wanted to thank you properly." "You already did. Not like this." Before he could argue, she turned and waved toward the driver. The man opened the trunk and pulled out 2 large boxes wrapped in gold ribbon. Zane stared. "What is that?" She stepped closer. "The first one is for Kellen. Art supplies, books, puzzles. I heard he loves to draw." His face softened. "He does, but you didn't have to. I wanted to." "And the second box," she smiled. "That one's for you. Clothes, a new jacket. Boots that don't have holes." He looked down, embarrassed. "Callie, I can't. I'm not trying to embarrass you," she said gently. "Just let me do something kind." He exhaled, unsure what to say. "You don't owe me anything." "I know," she said, her voice softer now. "But maybe I want to see you again." Zane's eyes met hers. "What are you saying?" She shrugged, playful now. "That maybe you saved my life, and now I'd like to buy you dinner." His lips twitched. "You're asking me out, only if you say yes." He shook his head, amused and stunned. "You're full of surprises." "You have no idea," she said, eyes twinkling. 3 nights later, Zane found himself in a suit, an actual suit that Callie had bought him, despite his protests, standing in front of a downtown restaurant with chandeliers in the windows and valet parking out front. He'd never felt more out of place in his life. She met him at the entrance, radiant in a navy dress and soft curls. "You clean up nice," she teased. He laughed under his breath. "I feel like I'm pretending to be someone else." "You're not," she said, slipping her arm through his. "You're just letting me spoil you a little." Dinner was surreal. Lobster, wine, laughter. She didn't talk about money or status. She asked about his job, his life, Kellen's school. She listened. She made him feel seen, and when they left the restaurant, she didn't rush. They stood under the city lights, her hand in his, as if time had slowed down. "I don't get it," he said quietly. "Why me?" She looked up at him. "Because when I was fading out in that room, I felt your arms around me, and I've never felt safer." His breath caught. "I don't care what you think you are, Zane. I know what I see. A man who runs into fire. A dad who'd do anything for his kid. You're not pretending. You're real." Then she leaned up on her toes and kissed him. And that, Zane realized, was the moment he started falling hard for the woman he carried out of the smoke. Without knowing, she was already in love with him. Zane adjusted the collar of his shirt as the elevators opened into a marble-floored lobby he never imagined stepping foot in. The walls shimmered with gold-veined stone, and the chandelier above him looked like it belonged in a museum, not a residential building. He ran a hand through his hair, wondering again if he should have declined Callie's invitation. "I want to show you something," she'd said after their second dinner, this one at a quiet rooftop bistro with a view that stretched beyond the river. "Come by tomorrow evening. Bring Kellen." He hadn't been able to say no, not when her eyes lit up like that. He glanced down at his son, who was holding a small sketchbook under one arm and staring wide-eyed at the gold-plated elevator buttons. "Dad, are we in a castle?" Zane let out a low breath. "Feels like it." A moment later, the elevator doors opened to a private hallway with a glass door at the end. Callie stood there barefoot, in jeans and a linen blouse, her hair loosely tucked behind her ears. She looked nothing like the poised woman from the restaurant, and everything like someone who'd been waiting all day to see them. "You made it," she said, stepping aside to let them in. Kellen's feet carried him before Zane could say anything. Whoa! The apartment was expansive, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. A baby grand piano sat near the corner, and on the opposite wall hung a massive canvas covered in wild splashes of color. Zane stepped in more slowly, taking it all in. "This is where you live, for now," she said. "I move around a lot, comes with the job." He narrowed his eyes. "What job is that exactly?" She motioned for them to follow her into a sunlit room at the back of the apartment. "I run a design firm, Prescott Atelier. We do interiors for hotels, yachts, luxury residences. I don't usually talk about it on first dates." Zane raised a brow. "That wasn't a first date," she grinned. "Then I guess I'm overdue." Kellen drifted into the room ahead of them, his eyes widening at the sight of a long table covered in paints, markers, and stacks of thick paper. "I told you he likes to draw," she said softly. Zane watched his son light up, pulling a chair closer without hesitation. "You set all this up. I thought he might enjoy it." He turned to her, trying to find the right words. "You didn't have to, I know." Her voice was quiet now, "but I wanted to." They stood there in silence, watching Kellen sketch a dragon with red wings and a crooked crown. Eventually, she nudged Zane's arm and said, "Come on, I want to show you the terrace." The door opened onto a wide balcony strung with soft lights, music playing low from a speaker tucked behind a planter. The city stretched far below them, the lights like scattered stars. "I don't get it," he said after a moment. "You live up here, in this world, why are you spending time with someone like me?" She leaned on the railing, her gaze on the horizon. "Because nothing up here means anything if there's no one to share it with." He frowned. "You don't have people, I have people," she said. "I just don't have someone who looks at me and doesn't see a price tag." Zane exhaled. "I didn't even know who you were until tonight. That's why I invited you here. I needed you to know before this goes any further." He turned to face her. "Are you saying it can?" She stepped closer. "I'm saying I want it to." Zane let the silence settle between them. Then he asked, "What happens when your world and mine don't mix?" She brushed a piece of hair from his face. Then we build our own. Inside, Kellen called out, Dad. Come see what I made. Zane hesitated, then nodded toward the door. Lead the way. Callie followed him back inside, her smile quiet but steady. Later that night, back in their modest apartment, Zane tucked Kellen into bed and sat on the worn couch staring at the ceiling. There was a new drawing taped to the fridge Kellen had insisted. It showed a castle in the clouds, a man with a mop in his hand, and a golden cape on his back. The next morning, a delivery truck stopped in front of the building. The driver handed Zane a slim envelope and said, "Instructions inside." The card was simple. "Wear this. Meet me at the glass room, 7 sharp." Inside the envelope was a tailored black jacket, sleek and fitted. Zane nearly dropped it when he saw the designer label. He pressed his lips together. "What are you doing to me, Callie?" That night, he stood outside a building with mirrored windows that reflected the evening sky. He stepped inside and was immediately greeted by a hostess who led him down a corridor lined with candles. The glass room lived up to its name walls of crystal-clear panels, the skyline twinkling in every direction. A single table had been set in the center, with silver cutlery and a small arrangement of white orchids. Callie stood by the window in a slate blue dress, her back to him as she looked out over the lights. "I thought you might not come," she said when he approached. "I almost didn't." She turned, searching his face. "Why? Because I don't belong here." She walked up to him and placed her hands on his chest. "You belonged the moment you walked into that burning room." He caught her hand. "I'm not used to this." "You don't have to be, you just have to let me in." Zane didn't respond right away. Then he said, "Let's sit." As they ate, he asked about her childhood, her parents, her first design project. She asked about his mother, who used to sing at open mic nights and taught him to cook spaghetti when he was 8. Every answer revealed something new, unwrapping layers neither of them had expected to share so soon. When dessert came, a waiter brought a single golden envelope and set it beside Zane's plate. Zane raised an eyebrow. "Now what?" Callie looked nervous for the first time since he'd met her. "Open it." Inside was a photograph. It showed a conference room mid-renovation, smoke curling from the ceiling, and Zane carrying her out in his arms. He stared at it. "Where did you get this?" "One of my assistants was documenting the renovation for investors. The camera was motion-triggered." "This is the only frame that survived." He looked at her. "You kept it." "I framed it," she said. "It's in my bedroom." He didn't know what to say to that. Callie leaned forward, her voice low. "I need you to understand something. You didn't just change my life that night. You gave me a reason to believe people like you still exist. And I want to keep you in my life, Zane. Not because you saved me, because you see me." He met her eyes. "I do, that's the problem." She tilted her head. "Why is that a problem?" "Because the more I see, the more I think I'm falling for you." Callie reached across the table. "Then let it happen." Zane looked at her hand in his, the skyline behind her, and the reflection of the two of them in the glass. And for the first time in a long time, he let himself hope. The first thing Zane noticed when Callie opened the door was that she looked tired, but not in the way people do when they haven't slept. It was like the weight of something invisible had finally settled on her shoulders, and she wasn't sure how long she could keep standing. He stepped inside without a word, glancing briefly at the darkened windows behind her. "You okay?" She nodded, almost too quickly. "Yeah. Just a long day." She reached for the switch near the wall and turned on a soft floor lamp. The glow highlighted the faint creases beneath her eyes, the kind that didn't come from age but from pressure. Zane had seen it before in himself, mostly. It was the look of someone holding everything together with their last thread. "Kellen's with my neighbor tonight," he said, taking off his jacket. "Figured we'd talk." She leaned against the arm of the couch, arms crossed. "About what?" He studied her. "You tell me." "You've been quiet since that night at the glass room." Callie dropped her gaze. "I've been dealing with something, a situation I didn't want to bring into this yet." Zane waited. She didn't speak right away. "I'm selling the company," she said finally. He blinked. "What?" She let out a breath. "I've been getting pressure from our board to expand into international markets. They want to franchise, mass produce, turn what I built into a chain of luxury showrooms. And you don't want that." "I built Prescott Adel yet to be personal. Every space, every design, it was supposed to mean something." But now it's numbers, spreadsheets, people I don't trust making decisions in my name. Zane stepped closer. So you're walking away from it. I'm trying to, she said, but I can't just vanish from my own empire overnight. There are contracts, investors, people who think I'm making an emotional mistake. He watched her jaw tighten. I didn't invite you here to dump all this on you, she said. I needed you to see what I'm trying to leave behind. Zane sat on the edge of the velvet chaise and rested his elbows on his knees. I've never had anything that big to walk away from. But I know what it feels like to stand at a fork and not know which road won't ruin you. Callie looked at him, her eyes softer now. You think I'm making the wrong call. I think you already made it. You're just waiting for someone to tell you it's okay. She moved toward him and reached for his hand. It doesn't scare you that I'm about to give up everything people think makes me valuable. He squeezed her fingers gently. The only people who think that's what makes you valuable never saw you clearly to begin with. Her breath caught slightly, but she didn't pull away. A beat passed between them before she said, I'm not used to people backing me when there's nothing in it for them. Well, I'm not used to someone asking me how I feel about anything. She smiled, faint but real. Then maybe we're both overdue. Later, they stood on the rooftop of her building, a place he hadn't been before. The air held the chill of late spring, and the city buzzed below, unaware of the quiet decisions being made high above it. Callie handed him a folded sheet of paper from her coat pocket. Read it. He opened it slowly, scanning the top line. It was a letter of resignation, handwritten, dated for the end of the month. You already signed it, he said. I wrote it 3 weeks ago, she replied. Kept it in my pocket every day since. I just couldn't hand it in. He looked at her. Why give it to me? Because I trust you to tell me if I'm making a mistake. Zane folded the paper again and held it out to her. You didn't need my permission, but if you want it, yeah. I think it's time. She took it from his hand and tucked it away again, this time into her purse instead of her coat. Then I'll deliver it tomorrow, he nodded once. Good. They didn't speak for a while. The wind toyed with her hair, and he stared out at the horizon, wondering how he'd ended up here with her in this moment, balanced between two lives neither of them wanted to go back to. I've never told anyone this, Callie said suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. But the night of the fire, I wasn't supposed to be at the hotel. Zane turned to look at her. I'd been fighting with my head of development. We were supposed to meet at the office, but I detoured to the site instead. I don't know why, something just pulled me there. He didn't speak, letting her finish. When the smoke started, I tried to get to the main exit, but something fell. I hit my head. The last thing I remember before blacking out was thinking, this is the end. Zane's chest tightened. And then, she continued, I woke up in your arms. He reached for her hand and laced their fingers together. You saved me from more than the fire, Zane. He looked down at her, heart pounding. Then let me stay. Callie pressed her forehead against his chest. I want you to. But if this is going to work, I need to do this my way. No safety nets, no second guessing. Then I'll be here when you're done. She pulled back just enough to look at him. Even if I don't have anything left, you'll still have me. The next morning, he dropped Kellen off at school and walked into work with a strange sense of clarity. The hotel lobby buzzed as usual, but he barely noticed. His shift supervisor approached with a clipboard mid-sentence when a man in a tailored suit intercepted them. Zane Reynolds, the man asked. Zane nodded, guarded. Yeah, the man extended a business card. I represent the Prescott Foundation. Miss Prescott suggested we speak to you about a new position. Zane narrowed his eyes. What kind of position? The man smiled. Facilities director for the foundation's outreach properties. Starting salary is 6 times what you're making now. Full benefits, flexible hours. And you'd be working with youth programs. Zane stared at him. Why? The man's smile didn't falter. Because someone believes in you. When he stepped outside later, the sun was breaking through the clouds. He pulled out his phone to call Callie. He didn't have to say anything when she answered. She only said so, and he replied, I'm in. Whatever this is, I'm all in. Zane stood just outside the towering glass doors of the Prescott Foundation's headquarters, his reflection staring back at him from the polished surface. He adjusted the collar of his charcoal gray coat, one of the few things he'd bought for himself, since accepting the position Callie had quietly arranged. The last few weeks had been a whirlwind of change, not just in circumstance, but in how he began to see his place in the world. Inside, the marble-floored lobby buzzed with the quiet hum of purpose. Children in bright jackets filtered past him toward an art room, trailed by staff volunteers. He scanned the space until his eyes landed on her. Callie was speaking with a woman in a navy pantsuit, her posture poised yet relaxed. She wore no makeup today, her hair pulled back loosely, and still Zane's chest tightened. This wasn't the woman he'd carried from a smoke-filled room. This was the woman who'd walked away from an empire with her head high and her heart open. When her gaze found him, she excused herself and crossed the room. "Is Kellen settled?" she asked, her voice low as they moved toward the inner courtyard. Zane nodded. "He's in the reading lounge with Mia. She's helping him sort through that shelf of graphic novels." Callie smiled faintly. "Good. He said he wanted to start a book club." Zane glanced at her sideways. "He also asked me if we're ever going to move into a place with more than one bedroom." Her brows lifted. "What did you say?" I told him I was thinking about it. Then he asked if it came with a dog. Callie laughed, the sound light and unburdened. "He's planning ahead." They stepped into the courtyard, where winter sunlight filtered through the glass ceiling. Raised beds of dormant herbs lined the edges, and a few citrus trees in large planters added a splash of green to the otherwise pale stone. "I've been thinking," Callie said, walking slowly. "About what comes next." Zane kept pace beside her. "For the foundation, for us." He stopped walking. "Yeah," she turned to face him. "I've spent so much of my life building things, offices, portfolios, brands, but I've never built anything that felt like home, not really." Zane's heart thudded once hard. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I bought a building." His brows shot up. "You what?" "It's a 2-story place in the East End. Used to be a bakery. It's been empty for years, but the bones are good. The top floor's a large loft. The bottom could be anything." He stared at her, speechless. "I want to renovate it," she continued. "With you, for Kellen, for us. I know it's sudden and maybe crazy, but I've spent the last month trimming everything in my life down to what matters. And this," she gestured between them, "this matters." Zane shook his head slightly, as if trying to clear it. "You're serious?" "I am. You want to live together. I want to build a life together, not just coexist, not just date. I want to wake up knowing we're moving forward, not standing still." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "We'll need 2 bathrooms." Callie blinked, and then a slow grin spread across her face. "That's your first thought. I've got a kid who's obsessed with bubble baths and leaves Lego bricks in the sink. Trust me, we'll need the space." She reached for his hand, linking her fingers through his. "So is that a yes?" "It's a yes." Later that evening, after Kellen had been picked up from the Foundation's youth program by their longtime neighbor and honorary grandmother, Zane and Callie stood in front of the old bakery building. The facade was weathered, but the windows were intact, and a faint mural of a pastry cart was still visible above the door. Zane stepped inside first, flipping on the industrial lights. The space smelled faintly of dust and citrus cleaner. "It's rough," he admitted, taking in the cracked tile and exposed beams. "But it's ours," Callie said, sliding her arm around his waist, "and I already have plans." He looked down at her. "Of course you do. I'm thinking open kitchen, long table, big windows. For the upstairs, maybe a skylight over the bed. Kellen gets the room with the built-in nook." Zane leaned against one of the counters. "You really see it, don't you?" "I do." He stepped closer. "I never thought this was possible. That someone like you would want any part of my life." Callie's eyes didn't waver. "Then let me show you just how wrong you were." He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her slow, deep, and without hesitation. The following weekend, they hosted a small gathering on the rooftop of the Foundation building, not a party, not a press event, just a quiet evening with the people who mattered. Kellen passed out invitations hand-drawn on notebook paper, and Callie insisted on stringing lights herself. Refusing the help of an event planner, Zane grilled skewers on a borrowed charcoal grill. Mia brought a homemade cake. The staff brought their kids. Jazz played softly from an old speaker, and laughter echoed between the towers. As the sun began to dip behind the skyline, Callie pulled Zane aside. I have something for you, she said, handing him a small velvet box. He opened it slowly to find a key inside, simple, silver, worn at the edges. That's the original key to the bakery, she said. I found it in a drawer with some old receipts. I thought you should have it. He turned it in his fingers. You're giving me the key to our future. No, she said, stepping closer. I'm giving you the key to our home. He kissed her then, in front of everyone, and no one interrupted. Kellen shouted something about marshmallows, and the music picked up just slightly. The city sparkled around them, but it was the warmth between them that made the night glow. And somewhere in the middle of it all, Zane realized something he hadn't dared to believe before. He wasn't falling anymore. He'd already landed. Right where he belonged. The scent of fresh plaster and sawdust hung in the air as Zane pushed open the new front door, the key cool in his palm. The late afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows of the old bakery, now nearly unrecognizable. Walls had been painted, floors refinished, and the long-forgotten counter now gleamed with a reclaimed wood finish. The space was no longer a shell, it was becoming theirs. Callie stood by the window, squinting at a fabric swatch held up to the light. Her hair was pulled into a loose braid, a pencil tucked behind one ear, barefoot and wearing a faded t-shirt with paint smudges on the sleeve. She looked over her shoulder as he stepped in. Be honest. Does this look like deep cerulean to you, or more like stormy regret? Zane laughed under his breath. I have no idea what either of those mean. She turned fully, holding the swatch up like a flag of surrender. I just want the reading nook to feel like a cozy hug, not a haunted Victorian parlor. He walked over and took the swatch from her hand, holding it against the light. It's a cozy hug. You're just saying that because you want to avoid another argument about paint. I'm saying that because I trust your instincts more than I trust a paint chip. She leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder. The contractor called. The upstairs bathroom tile came in. They'll be done by next weekend. Does that mean we can move in soon? Her eyes lifted to meet his. We could start bringing things over now, slowly, make it feel real. Zane nodded, then tilted his head toward the ceiling. Kellen's going to want to pick his room again. I already told him he could paint a mural on one wall. That sealed the deal. He looked down at her. You keep doing that. What? Making room for us. She reached up to brush a bit of sawdust from his shirt. Isn't that the whole point? That evening, they curled up on a picnic blanket in the center of the empty living room, a takeout box of Thai food between them. Kellen had fallen asleep earlier on the couch at Mia's, after insisting he be the first to officially test his new room. Zane had promised to pick him up before bedtime, but for now it was just the two of them. I never asked, Callie said as she picked at her noodles. What did you want to be before life got in the way? Zane took a sip of water, his brow furrowing in thought. I used to think I was going to be a mechanic. I liked taking things apart, figuring out how they worked. But then my mom got sick and I took whatever job I could to keep us floating. Never really looked back. She leaned into his side. You still do that with people. You figure out what's broken and put it back together. He looked down at her. You're not broken. Maybe not anymore. He set his food aside and took her hand. You know, if someone had told me I'd be here 6 months ago, I would have laughed in their face. That makes two of us. He kissed her temple. You changed everything. She turned toward him, her expression soft. You walked into my life like a storm and cleared out everything I didn't need. I didn't know how to let someone love me until you did. He touched her face, his voice low. Then let me do it for the rest of our lives. The next morning, they picked up Kellen and drove out to a nearby nursery. The boy had been adamant about picking a housewarming plant, and after much debate, chose a small lemon tree in a bright yellow pot. It's symbolic, he said from the back seat, hugging the pot to his chest. Fresh starts and lemonade. Callie leaned over to whisper, Your kid might be a genius, Zane grinned. Takes after his dad. They spent the rest of the afternoon arranging furniture, hanging curtains, and laughing over misplaced screws and crooked picture frames. Kellen insisted on setting up a welcome mat, even though they weren't officially moving in for another week. By sunset, the loft glowed with warm light and quiet contentment. Callie stood at the stove, stirring a pot of soup while Zane unpacked dishes onto open shelves. Feels like we've always been here, she said without turning. Zane looked around and nodded. It does. That night they lit a single candle on the windowsill. Kellen had fallen asleep on a pile of cushions, the lemon tree beside him. Zane pulled Callie close, her back to his chest as they stood by the window. The city lights twinkled in the distance. "Marry me," he said quietly. She turned in his arms, eyes wide. "Now? No, not this second, but someday when it's right for both of us. When we've built this place into everything it's meant to be." She cupped his face, her voice trembling slightly. "Is that your way of saying you're already in it for the long haul? I was in the moment I carried you out of that fire." She kissed him then, slow and certain, her fingers curling into the fabric of his shirt like she never wanted to let go, and she wouldn't have to, not now, not ever. Several months later, the bakery turned home was alive with warmth and color. The downstairs space had become a community studio where kids from the foundation came to paint on weekends. The upstairs loft had become a sanctuary. On Saturdays, they cooked pancakes in pajamas. On weeknights, Callie and Zane sat on the balcony with tea while Kellen read on the couch, feet tucked beneath their new dog, a sleepy Labrador mix named Benny. The photo from the fire, the one that started it all, was framed and tucked on a shelf in the hallway. Not on display, but not hidden either. A quiet reminder of where they'd come from, but it was the candid photo pinned beside it that mattered more. The three of them on the front steps, covered in paint from Kellen's mural, laughing so hard the camera had caught them mid-tear. That was the real beginning. That was the life they'd built, messy, beautiful, real. And it was only just getting started.